Hey guys, in this video we will discuss the top interview questions of the Java. So let's start the video. So let's start with the first question. What is the difference between the JDK, JRE and the JVM? Imagine you just wrote your first Java program. But how does that code go from your keyboard to actually running on your computer? In this journey, JDK, JRE and the JVM are used. Each one has a specific job and without them your Java code is sitting there doing nothing. Let's see what happens when you run a Java program. So you have written your Java program inside the hello.java file. So first of all, JDK comes into play. JDK will compile this particular Java file into the bytecode. So hello.java is converted into hello.class. So after compiling, we get the bytecode. This particular compiling is done using the javec command. Now after that, to run this particular bytecode, we run the command java hello. This is where JRE comes into play. JRE basically loads the JVM, that is the Java Virtual Machine, and required libraries too. So basically, let's say in the hello.java file, you have introduced some additional libraries over here, which is been used by your code. So JRE will help you to load these library files into the JVM so that JVM can finally read this particular bytecode and execute it, and finally you can see the hello world on your computer screen. Now let's break them down clearly. JVM, it's a Java virtual machine. It executes your program's bytecode. JRE, that is the Java runtime environment. It gives JVM everything it needs to run, libraries, files, etc. So basically JRE loads the JVM. And the JDK, that is the Java development kit. It gives you the tools to write, compile, and then run the Java code. So this particular compilation and this particular running of the code is been done using the JDK, but with the help of JRE and the JVM. So basically JRE loads the JVM, JVM reads the bytecode, and this particular bytecode is generated by the JDK. In a layman language, JDK is like a film studio. It gives you the camera, crew, and the tools to create your movie. JRE is your home theater system. It has the screen, speakers, and the remote so that you can enjoy the movie. And the JVM is the TV screen. It plays the movie file you give it. And also you have heard about that Java is a platform independent. So this is because of the JVM. Java has its own virtual machine where it runs the code. So if you are working on a Windows, Mac OS, Linux or any other operating system, it doesn't matter because Java doesn't use your operating system. It has its own. So that's why if you compile your code in the Windows, then you can run it in the Mac OS. Now let's talk about stack versus heap memory in Java. We will walk through a Java program line by line and visually show what happens inside the JVM. So let's start with some basics. Let's say you have written a Java program. Now a program can divide its work into multiple subtasks. So let's say this is task 1, task 2, task 3, task 4. Each task is assigned to a particular thread. What is thread? Thread is the smallest unit of work that can run within the program. So basically, program can divide its work into multiple tasks and assign them to a thread and make them run parallel. Think of it as a multiple task running in parallel within a single program. However, it's important to note that Java doesn't automatically break down the program into multiple tasks and assign them to threads. Instead, it's up to the programmer to explicitly define how the work should be divided across the threads. Now, each thread basically require its own space, and this particular temporary workspace is known as stack memory. The stack is like a temporary workspace where the thread can store things it needs while running a function. Each thread has its own stack. The data is kept separate and organized for each particular thread. Inside a stack, when a thread calls a function, a stack frame is created. The stack frame holds the local variables and the references to the objects. Each time when a thread calls a particular function, a new stack frame is created to hold the function's data. Once the function finishes, the stack frame is removed and the stack is cleared, making space for the next task. This organization helps Java keep everything in order even when multiple threads are running at the same time. Each thread works in its own stack and clears it once it's done. Now let's talk about the heap memory. Heap is the storage in the Java where all the objects are stored. It was shared by the whole program, each thread. So basically, each thread can access this particular heap memory. The data stays here until the Java garbage collector removes it. Now let's discuss two more points before we walk through our Java program. First is references. References are the pointers that points to an object where the object is stored inside the heap. Uh, let's say we define a particular object, person P equal to new person A. So in this case, P is the reference that is stored inside the stack. But the actual object will be live in the heap memory. So that's why references are the pointers which point to the particular object which is stored inside the heap memory. The P should be populated with the address memory of the heap. Now the last point is what is string pool. So basically Java stored the strings inside the heap memory. Because strings are not the primitive data types in the Java, they are the objects. But these strings will be stored in the heap at a special place called string pool. So the advantage of storing the strings in the string pool is that if the same string is used again, so let's say string s1, so let's say string s1 equal to a and string s2 equals to a. So in this case, stack will contain two stack frame, one for s1, one for s2, but they both point to the same memory address where the a lives. So basically in the heap, a will be stored only single time. Now let's walk through a program line by line. First of all, main function is called. So basically for the main function, a new stack frame is allocated. After that, a variable x is defined. And then a string greeting equal to hello is defined. So basically greeting is stored as a reference and the hello will be stored over here. So this particular reference is pointing to this particular hello. After that, a person P object is initialized. So let's remove this stack frame size. So now P reference to the person object and that particular person object is defined over here. And the name is also a string. So the Alex will be defined in the string pool. After that, say hello function is called. Now because say hello is the new method, so new stack frame is created. And inside the say hello, we are printing the statement, hi, I am that particular name. So basically in this case, Alex is passed. So hi, I am Alex will be printed on the screen. Now after the say hello function will be executed completely, the stack frame will be emptied. So basically this particular stack frame will be get freed to be allocated by a new method. And once the main function also get completed, this particular space will be also get freed. Now keep this particular point in the mind that heap doesn't get clear after the method is finished. Heap will be removed based upon the Java garbage collector. Java uses a garbage collector to look for the unused objects and clean them up periodically. Since there are no references left in the stack to the person object or the strings, the garbage collector will eventually clean the heap memory also. Guys, now let's discuss about the next question. Java is a pass by value or a pass by reference. So Java is strictly pass by value. But what tricky is what the value you are passing inside the function. Either it could be the primitive data type or the objects. Now let's quickly discuss about both of the things. What are they? Primitive data types are the basic building blocks which are not objects, of course, and are stored in the stack memory, so they are fast and memory efficient. Java has basically 8 primitive data types, and because these are not objects, they don't have any methods to be called. And on the other hand, objects are the instance of the class, and class is basically the template, and the object is the real thing that is created with the help of template. Now these objects are stored in the heap memory, and these are accessed by the references. Now let's quickly take an example. So in this case, we have a main function. I have defined two variables over here. One is the primitive data type and another one is object. And after that, I've called this particular function. So one by one, we pass a primitive data type and object, and let's see how this particular code behaves. So till now, how our stack memory and the heap memory will look like. So for this particular main function, a stack frame is allocated in the stack. So let's say this is the stack frame for the main function. Inside there is a variable and there is a p variable that has a reference to a person object. That has a reference to a person object, and this person object is stored in the heap memory. So this is how our stack and the heap memory will look like. Now first of all, let's pass the primitive data type inside the function. So I have passed a in this particular function and I have received the a over here. So in this case, because a function ftn is a separate function, so a new stack frame will be allocated. So let's say this is the stack frame for the function, and because Java is a pass by value, so we create a copy of a variable. So we also have int a equal to 10 over here. And in this case, if I let's say change the value of a to 11, then in that case this particular value will be changed to 11 but not this one. Now let's pass the object in the function. So I have passed p over here and I receive p over here too. And because Java is a pass by value, so we create a copy of object p. So inside the function stack frame, a p variable is defined which is referencing to the same object person 101. Now let's say this particular person object has a name field, name equal to a, and inside this function I have changed the name to b, and I have print in this particular line print p dot name. So what do you think? What will be printed in this case? Now, if you think from pass by value perspective, then you will think that a new object is created inside the function. So if a name variable inside the object is changed, then it should not change the name variable of the object inside the main function. But you should be aware of the concept is that both the p variable doesn't store the object, it just stores the references. Object is stored in the heap memory. So if you change the heap memory, and because both variable p is pointing to the same object, p dot name will be changed for both of them. So p dot name will be b in the main function. Next question is overloading versus overriding. Or in the interview, you will be asked about compile time polymorphism versus runtime polymorphism. First, let's discuss about the method overloading. So in the method overloading, when multiple functions in the same class have the same name but different parameters. So basically, let's say we have a class uh, math, and inside I have multiple add function. So int add int a comma int b. Another function is looking like double add double a comma double b, or a function look like int add int a int b int c. So basically the name of the function is same but the parameters are different. So this is the method overloading. Basic key points to remember is that first of all it happens within the same class. It's the compile time polymorphism. At the compile time we are deciding which function to use, and it's basically improve the code readability by using the same method name for similar operations. But keep this point in mind, overloading doesn't happen with the return type. So if I say double add int a comma int b, this will give you a compile time error. So the method overloading only happen with the parameters, not with the return types. So for overloading to happen, the name of the function should be same, but the parameter should be different, either in terms of numbers or in terms of data type of the parameter. Now let's discuss about the method overriding. But before going over the runtime polymorphism or the method overriding, I want you to look at this example. Here we have a child class and a parent class, and some methods defined in each of the class. Now I have given you two scenarios. In the first case, we have a reference C of type child which is pointing to the child object. Here C can access all the child methods and the inherited methods from the parent class. Now look at this second example. In this case, we have a reference P of type parent, but it's also accessing the child object. Now here I will give you three examples. P.greet, P.walk, and P.play. Now see, because the reference is of parent type, then you can only access the parent methods. So when you are accessing P.play, then you will get a compile time error as it's not defined inside the parent class. But when you are accessing P.greet, then it won't give you compile time error as parent class has a greet function, so compiler will work fine. But think about it. What will be printed when you call the greet function? Keep this point in mind that you as a parent reference still pointing to the child object. So in this case, hello from child is printed. So what happens is that at the compile time when p.greet is called, then it check whether greet function is available or not inside the parent class. But when you are actually running the code, then at that time it get to know that this reference is actually pointing to the child object. So at runtime it get to know that it has to call child greet method, not the parent greet method. Parent as a reference is only used while compiling the code because at that time it only check the syntax, and because reference is of p type, then you can only access the parent method. But at runtime you will get to know that it actually pointing to the child object, so it will print hello from child. So this is basically the runtime polymorphism. At the runtime you are deciding which method to call. And if you wanted to know about the definition of the method overriding or the runtime polymorphism, it's like when a child class provides its own implementation of a method that is already defined in a parent class. So in this case, greet method is overridden. Now let's discuss about the three famous methods you should know before going to understand the difference between the interface and the abstract class. These are the abstract methods, static methods, and the default methods. Let's discuss one by one. Imagine you are designing a game with different animals. You want each animal to make a sound, but you don't know yet what the sound is. That's where abstract methods come in. A abstract method is a method that has a name, a return type, and the parameters, but no body. For example, int function colon. So we have the name, we have the return type, and we have the certain parameters, but we don't have any body. Think of it as a promise, a contract. You are saying whoever uses me must implement this behavior. They can be used in the abstract and the interfaces, but not in the concrete class. So basically, these abstract methods can be used only in the interfaces and abstract class. So the abstract methods and the abstract class are two different things. So don't confuse between them. All the methods inside the interfaces are implicitly abstract unless marked as default or static, which we will discuss now. So basically in the interfaces, if we have any method who doesn't have any keyword like static or default, then it will be treated as abstract method. Apart from that, the concrete class, that is the normal class, cannot contain the abstract methods. If a class, let's say I have an abstract class over here, and it has a function, let's say int fn this, and if I have a class b which implements a, then I have to define this function. So basically I have to add the body of this function. So let's say this is something body of this particular function. So I have to add it. If you don't define the abstract methods, then you will get a compilation error. So abstract methods help you to enforce the behavior, but leave the implementation part to the subclasses. Now let's discuss the second method, default method. Before Java 8, you can only define the abstract methods inside the interfaces. So basically inside the interface, you only have the abstract methods. So basically if any class is implementing this particular interface, then they all have to implement all of these methods. But let's say you want some common logic to all the classes that are implementing the common interface. Then at that point of time, you have to implement the particular common logic inside every class. But after Java 8, default methods are introduced, which help us to add some logic inside the methods of the interfaces, which are common to every class. They are super useful when you want to update an interface without breaking all the classes that uses it. So basically you can just directly add the method inside this particular interface, and this particular method will be applicable to all of these classes. And also you can override a default method in your implementing class. So basically let's say there is a method called function. So you can just override this particular function inside this class A, class B and class C as per your needs. And keep this point in mind, you cannot use default method inside the abstract classes. They are exclusive to interfaces. Last method is static method. Static methods are like utility workers. They don't belong to any specific object. They work at the class level. So basically you don't have to initiate a class in order to use a static method. You can directly access it using the class. And also these methods can only access the static data directly. So basically let's say you have defined a static final x equal to 10. Then this particular variable x will be accessible to the static method. These static methods can be available inside the concrete classes, abstract classes, or even in the interfaces. They can be overloaded. That is, they can have the same name but different parameters. But they cannot be overridden like regular methods. So inheritance behavior doesn't apply the same way. So basically, abstract methods are used when you have to implement a certain method inside the subclass. So in the abstract method, you just declare the method in the parent class, and inside the child, you will implement it. But inside the but with the default method, you add the implementation inside the parent class itself, which is common to every subclasses which will inherit it. But with the default methods, you can also override the implementation of the default methods also. So this is the basic difference between the abstract methods and the default methods. So this is all about these three methods. Now let's discuss the difference between the interfaces and the abstract class. Before we dive into details, here is the golden rule to remember. Interfaces are what something can do, but abstract classes are what something is. Let's say you are creating a new class, a student, and this student wants to learn from multiple teachers, a music teacher, a sports coach, a coding mentor. In Java, if you use abstract class, you can only extend one, like having just one parent. But if you use interfaces, you can implement as many as you want, like learning skills from different teachers. So interfaces support multiple inheritance. Abstract classes doesn't. So it's like coaches. So you can have multiple coaches, but you have a single parent. So if your class needs to walk, speak and recharge like a robot, use interfaces. Now, here is the next question you should ask yourself. Are you describing something that this object can do or something it is? For example, flyable, draggable, printable, these are skills. Vehicle, animal, employee, these are real world things. Skills, then use interfaces, but if you're talking about real things, use abstract classes. Let's say your object need to remember stuff like fuel level, battery percentages or name. That's called state in the programming. Interfaces can't store data. They are like coaches. They give instructions, but they don't keep notes. Abstract classes, they are like parents. They remember your birthday, your bedtime, and your habits. So if your behavior depends on stored values, go with the abstract class. If you want to store the state, go with the abstract class. Now imagine you as a parent who wants all your kids to follow a morning routine. Example, wake up, exercise and eat breakfast. But you let them decide how to exercise or what to eat. You control the flow but give flexibility in the middle. That's what abstract classes can do. They give you a template. Now lastly, let's say you're creating a plugin system like a payment gateway. You want developers to use your code but also allow them to plug in their own logic. And tomorrow you might want to add new methods but you don't want their code to break. That's where default methods are used. You can add new behavior to an interface without breaking the old code. Abstract classes can't do this easily. Adding a new method means every subclass must update. As if you add a new behavior to abstract class using abstract method, then you have to implement it in every subclass, resulting in breaking of code for a while. I know you can rectify it, but it will break. On the other hand, default methods don't need to be implemented. That's why in this case, interfaces are used. And you already know that default methods are only available in interfaces. So basically, interfaces provide you better flexibility. And the abstract class will provide you a template. So these are the core idea behind choosing the abstract classes or the interfaces. So this is the core idea behind the difference between the interfaces and the abstract class. Just remember these cases to identify which to use. Guys, that's all for this video. This is just part 1. In the upcoming days, there will be multiple subparts which will help you to learn Java more effectively. So stay tuned with this channel. If you like this video, please subscribe, like and comment. And if you have any questions, just ask in the comment section or join my Discord channel. Okay then, goodbye.